Welcome back to a Celtic state of mind. At least Chris is smiling. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Friday afternoon, and I'm here with Jim Orr, the OG, and Chris McElwain, the DD. There we go. Not sure what my acronym is, but I'm sure you can come up with one. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved all week. Thank you to JP Mason for holding the fort yesterday, where I was going for a wee cup of tea in between, the Wi-Fi going haywire. Lots to talk about. Always great to have Jim Orr and Chris on the show, so that everybody knows. Jim, you step in for me when I can't make meetings. Anything interesting in the steering group meeting the other night? I know that the minutes are going to be released soon.
I thought OG stood for old guy until a couple of days ago when I looked it up. So it's
what did it come up as? Old git instead.
yeah. Your term of reverence apparently. So hey ho. But yeah, usually I can spend maybe an hour or so before the podcast trying to familiarise myself with who we're playing and who we played last time and what's been happening. But I was on 3 weeks ago. That's the last time I was on, and the whole world of Celtic has went a bit bonkers in the past 3 weeks. I thought, well, I better write this down to figure out which of these ones that you're going to talk about, because last time I was on 3 weeks ago. 2 days after that's a Glasgow derby, which was rubbish. 2 days after that, three of us did a This Is Acsom after the transfer window closed, and it's we're all kind of like angry people. That night I went along to the Trust meeting. Ian Conroy, Lawrence Conley for Acsom came along as well to that. The day after that was the open letter from the Green Brigade North Curve guys. 3 days after that, so that was a letter that 400, 500, 600 people then put their names to. 3 days after that, the club statement, which has been torn apart. The day after that, it's a CSA no confidence vote. Day after that, it's a fan summary that the North Curve put out. 2 days after that, there's a supporters meeting to go over the fan survey, which is quite phenomenal. Over 100 Celtic fans came together representing tens of thousands of fans. A meeting that you facilitated, Paul, when I was your plus one. I went along to that. 2 days after that, what happened 2 days after that? This is Acsom again, David Lowe on. And I was up at Lennoxtown interviewing Brendan Rodgers, attending the press conference.
Getting a cuddle from.
So I don't know what you want to talk about. Anyway, 2 days after that, it's the Kilmarnock game, a bit of football for a change, the protest. And the day after that was the first meeting of the steering group, which, as you just mentioned there, that because you've got 1,000, you've got a finger on 1,000 pies and you live in deepest, darkest Fife. I've kind of said, if you can't make any meetings, then I'll be the, not even your plus one, I'll be it. I'll be that. So there's been hundreds of things that have happened in the past few weeks. So which one do I talk about?
All of the above from the OG.
Also, just quickly, I want to name check a pal, because in the last 3 weeks, obviously, all the group chats have been going absolutely mental, and you're kind of texting your mates back and forward and whatever. But one of my mates, Ian Brennan, give you a name check. Ian sent me a text the other day. The most brilliant phrase, which I'm going to use time and time again now, is that our board never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. It's genius. It's just an absolute genius phrase. It should be on every banner. You should actually tag it after a club like no other. A club like no other. We never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
That's a beautiful idea.
And I just think that the last 3 weeks are because of that phrase, that, we have just missed another opportunity. And that's what's led to all this. And I think there's a great deal of anger after the get knocked out of Europe or get knocked out of the Champions League qualifier and the transfer window. My concern is that anger starts to subside, and I can see it subsiding over the past few weeks, because there was a lot of anger in that meeting that you facilitated. 100 people in the room, really, really angry.
Yeah.
These are the guys who go to the games. These are the guys who are up and down the country and going to Europe, furious, absolutely furious with what's happening. So, and then what followed from that was forming this steering group to take things forward, and there was loads of people volunteering for that, which was really encouraging. And I sat in the meeting the other night, as you said, and I think the results of that meeting will be published pretty soon. What the next step in the campaign is, etc. So I can't really say anything till the guys issue something. But dead impressed with the Green Brigade guys, dead impressed with the boys. And I think a lot of fans think they're kind of daft wee teenagers, but these are intelligent, articulate young guys who've got good ideas and a plan and thought things through really well. So really encouraged by that meeting the other night and the breadth of kind of knowledge and experience and understanding that was on that steering group. So hopefully they can take things forward, because what we can't do is just forget how horrendous that transfer window was. What we can't do is forget the fact that we get knocked out by a team who are basically St Johnstone. And I'm not absolving the manager for that, or the players, because I think what I said, and this is Acsom, I think it's a kind of shared responsibility. And if you put numbers against it, I'd have said 50% the board, maybe 25% the manager and 25% the players, ish, if you put some numbers against that. And the manager said that himself last week at that press conference, which I was at. He takes his share of the responsibility. But everything does come back to the fact that, once again, our board have missed an opportunity, and we can't let them off the hook. We really can't. So
no, we can't, Jim. And by the way, all the points that you've made, I think we'll touch on all of them, because obviously the OG has come out of the crypt, Chris. There we go. He's come out of the crypt to get back involved in the fan movement all these years later. I love the fact that there was representation from some of the 1990s hardcore like Jim Orr, not the viewer in the room, and many others who, I mean, you were talking about Green Brigade and Boys, but you look at some of these people, Jim, who run or are part of running an association or an affiliation, the amount of time that they put in. You've spoken in the past, Jim, about the dedication to even being a youth football coach, giving something back to kids with regards to coaching but the time that these people put into things like this, Chris, and it's the same with anybody who's involved in a group, a steering group. You look at what the Fans Against Criminalisation people did, the Celtic Trust group, the Boys, the Green Brigade. What strikes me when I'm in a room like that is that the dedication it transcends going to the games. It's like, day upon day, the organisation, the time that they'll never get back, the money that they need to raise to make it work, particularly with demonstrations and protests. Unbelievable. And I think a lot of people have got this view, Chris, they're this, they're that, they think they're bigger than the club. What they put into this behind the scenes that people don't see, and I know now and again they'll release a video of them doing the tifos, etc. It's incredible, the dedication that all these groups are involved in this steering group.
It absolutely is, and I think that is a great, I think, marrying up of the experienced heads like Jim, who've been through, not like for like, but been through a similar kind of movement, as it were, and you're marrying that up with, folks who are coming through a different generation, who are coming in with, different ideas, maybe different viewpoints, bringing all sorts of different diverse experience and knowledge to the table. And the point you made there, I think, is a really key one, and it's something that always upsets me to a degree, is that I don't like the stereotypical view of football fan. Football fans just it's the lowest common denominator and all this. Absolutely dreadful, a really horribly condescending viewpoint, because football supporters are made up of people from all walks of life. There's no prerequisite to being a football fan. You just have to, want to support, want to enjoy football, and you might want to have a club to support. And the dedication, as you say, from those affiliated in supporting Celtic, whether it be, the organised bodies that you've mentioned, the fan groups, the charitable organisations, and all that stuff, the foundation do stuff, the Green Brigade do, it's incredible. And it's not something that they do for 10 minutes or 15 minutes in their bedrooms. It's not daft wee lads, as has often been the label. These are people with careers, with families, with commitments, and yet they still have this, as you say, this dedication and this commitment to trying to promote the club in the right way, to try and give us the best possible exposure, to try and do things for the community. And that, by the way, that's not just extended to the Celtic community. Okay, it goes beyond that. It goes to Scotland, it goes to Ireland, it goes to humanitarian causes. As far and diverse as Palestine, Ukraine, etc., all that kind of thing. So, for me, you can never and should never ever label a fan as one thing or another, because every single fan, for me, every single supporter is as important as the next one, and they all bring something. And even if it's just a case of someone going to the game, paying their money for their ticket, going to the game, sitting there supporting their team for 90 minutes, and they go every week, and that's what they do, that's still an incredible investment in this day and age, and it's something that not everybody has the opportunity to do. So we should never ever take for granted the impact and the effect that supporters have positively on this football club.
Without a doubt, Chris. And again, I think we need to get away from the elitism of, putting a fan here and putting somebody below them. We're all Celtic fans. It's as simple as that. And that's what I've loved about the unity shown when it comes to coming together as a fan collective. Lots more to come. There will be a name
I think,
release.
Sorry, on you go, sorry.
No, it's all right. The OG speaks, we listen. On you come.
No, I was just going to say you highlighted what it was like to be in that room on that night, because it's dead easy for me to sit here and spout off, we should do this and do that. It's dead easy for some anonymous, faceless keyboard warrior typing out, we should be doing this, whatever. But to be in that room and to feel the anger and the frustration and the annoyance, because these are the guys who are going to do something. And what you don't just do is just some knee-jerk thing. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some comments in here having a wee pop at me that you should be doing this, that, and the other. You can't do this, that, and the other. It has to be organised, and it takes a lot of organisation to do these kind of things. And the levels that I've seen so far are quite phenomenal. That fan survey, those young guys turned that around in 2 days.
Amazing.
2 days, turned 40,000 fans. Mm-hmm. And we're still waiting for the Celtic one to come out.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, Jim, that's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Right?
Why don't they want to
release
release
a survey in 2 days, and we're waiting months, for
and what the young lads felt was that, as I said to last day, they said, do something. We need to do. So those are the guys who put their heads above the parapet. Those are the guys that spent time and a bit of money to try and do something. Now, the survey could go further. Obviously, it could go further because they did it like that and turned it around like that. So when you get 90% say this and I said this at the meeting myself, that, you don't know the makeup of who's answered those questions. Mm-hmm. There was one about should we boycott the Europa League? And I'm pretty sure there were people in the content in the comments chat. Yeah, of course you want. That's how you hit the board. That's how you hit the board. Over 90% said yes. Right. So let's do it. However, what the lads were smart enough to do is they took a survey of 10 supporters clubs before the meeting, and 90% of them said don't boycott.
Yep.
These are the guys you listen to. Mm-hmm. Not some keyboard warrior sitting in Italy or wherever who maybe watch the Celtic TV. These are the guys who are up and down the country, at Ross County, 12 o'clock kickoffs, they're in Europe, they're making these tifos that are spending, ages costing a lot of money. Mm-hmm. As Chris said, and I totally agree, no Celtic fan is better than another Celtic fan. They all share the same emotion and the passion. But these are the guys I listened to. At the meeting, they had a vote to say, somebody suggested a late entry at the Kilmarnock game last week. Mm-hmm. Let's have a vote. I didn't vote. I abstained. I wasn't going to the Kilmarnock game. So why should I be telling these guys what to do? And the vote was carried. We're going to walk in 10 minutes late. And then 2 days later, you see somebody's actually had to be thinking about that and thought, I'll tell you what would be good. Make it 12 minutes. Because that's like the 12th man. That's great. That's a wee bit of thinking about, link it into something as opposed to 10. 10's random. 12, you've linked that in. So there's a phenomenal amount of organisation to be done before you get to each step. And it's just dead simple. People say, do this and do that. No, because some of the stuff the guys that were talking about, even the other night, some of the complexities about what you can't do. And at the meeting, again, one of the things I always think is if you're going to a meeting, you need to speak. Otherwise don't go.
You spoke very well, Jim. I'm not just saying that.
And it's been a long time since I've worked, but anytime I'd had to organise a meeting.
Rubbing it in there. It's a long time since I had to get out of my bed to work.
I get out of my bed with my MCL injury. By the way, I get out of bed just these days. But one of the things I would always, 3 objectives, which I won't bore you with, but one was make an effective contribution when you're at the meeting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no much point in being there. And I said to the guys themselves, you've got a number of objectives here. I don't think they're right objectives. I would do this. Mm-hmm. But it's a democratic process. Some of the actions I'm saying, should be boycott merchandise. I on you, go for it. But no, I don't actually buy any merchandise. Why am I telling, merchandise jersey fanatics like Paul John Dykes to say, no, don't buy it. Look at the Acsom group chat. It's full of guys who are just obsessed with jerseys. which I will never understand. So
Yeah.
it's not for me to tell these guys, don't buy the new jersey that's coming out because that'll hit the board hard. It's not my place to do that. But if I was at the game, if I had a ticket for Kilmarnock last week, I'd have stayed behind the 12 minutes because I think it was quick. And then people are then saying, oh, that's not going to get rid of the board. Of course it's not going to get rid of the board. That's the first thing you do. They wanted to just do something, do something. What can we do at Kilmarnock?
Yeah.
And other guys in the room are saying, well, that doesn't back the team and you want to back the team and that'll affect the team. And what they said, well, some people will do it and some people won't. And what you then do, as what you highlighted the other day, was they did a count. And 75% of the fans did that. And the point of doing that is it made headlines. People were talking about it. The papers were talking about it. I was at the press conference and I'll talk about that then. It's quite surreal, because this time last week, I'm sitting kind of like organising the furniture and getting the mic out and stuff like that. And then I get a text from the man in the top left-hand corner saying, you fancy going to Brendan's press conference in Lennoxtown? And you're thinking, what, this press conference, everyone and his dog is just waiting for? It's going to be box office. Aye, all right, I'll go to that. So you head up to Lennoxtown and I'm thinking, and then you then find out that there's not a separate fan media. Because usually what they do is they'll have like the mainstream media, as you know, Chris, because you've been to a few of these yourself. The mainstream guys on Sky, Daily Record, Radio Clyde, they're in, and then we fan media guys tour along afterwards, and we get a wee bit at the end. But you're in with the main guys, so and you can't push yourself at the front, and you can't talk before they talk. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, 2 days before I'm at that meeting, as I said to you, Paul, white hot meeting. So I think that's what I have to ask Brendan Rodgers, because I've got this unique opportunity in this room to ask the man, or to tell the man, the strength of feeling. And what I said was, I was at a meeting a couple of nights ago, Brendan, over 100 Celtic supporters representing tens of thousands of Celtic fans, and high emotions, high anger, because once again, what we've done is shot ourselves in the foot. We haven't signed these players. We needed to sign before the Champions League. And I quoted him what he said. What was the thing he said? Manage your own, manufacture our own stress. That's what he said. So I played that back to him, basically, and then said that the fans feel as if they have to do something and they have to vent their frustration. So Saturday, they're doing the 12-minute coming in, signifying the 12th man. And I said, this is just the start of this. There's going to be loads of these kind of things happening because the fans are really, really, really angry. Not at you, not at the players, but the people who run this club. What would be your message to them? So that was my question.
Great question.
To the great man.
Yeah.
And then when it finished and I was kind of just about to go, he passed by me and I shook his hand and said, good luck, Brendan, all the best. And he pulled me close, gave me a hug, pats me in the back, and he said, well done. And our eyes met. Man crush, total man crush. That's me. I'm organising a wedding. The man can do no wrong. He's great. I love him.
What aftershave does he wear, Jim?
I should have asked him that, shouldn't I?
That's
quite surreal to be in the room when all of that stuff was happening.
I know.
And he said the word coward. You're thinking,
Grenade, shots
and then
fired.
Somebody then jumps in. Well, I think the guy from the Daily Record, Michael Gannon, who I spoke to for 10 minutes, big Celtic fan. That's the thing about people going, the Daily Record. You're Tony Haggerty worked there for 20 years. You take a bigger Celtic fan than Tony Haggerty.
That's how I know
Michael Gannon,
Celtic fan, because Tony
big Celtic fan.
Yeah.
All his family Celtic fans. You get a chance to talk to these guys. So, and he's the guy that then follows up and says, the way you said that, Brendan, I think you know who it is. And then Brendan does his great kind of like, stuff type of thing. And then somebody towards the end then said, well, if you find the coward, do you think you should go? This is brilliant. And you're sitting there thinking, popcorn, just brilliant. Oh, I better ask a question. Hold on. I was in the room the other night, Brendan, shaking hands, well done. Totally surreal. But that's what happens to me involved with Acsom. Totally and utterly surreal. Yeah.
But Jim, it was a great question, and I felt also that Brian Gilmore, who was in there, Harry Brady for Celtic Underground, asked a brilliant question, as did Michael Gannon. It's not just about saying, fan media asked a lot of good questions. Michael Gannon was brilliant. I don't know if you've seen what you and Cameron's been up to on the socials, but we'll maybe touch on that as well. No offence to the Italian Acsom branch of the CSC. If you are a Celtic fan in Italy, obviously your views and your comments are welcome on Acsom as well. But in relation to all this, we will get to the football. We'll get to that. But there's just so much to unpack I want to talk about, guys, right? I want to talk about the comments made. I've had to think about this since I spoke to JP, and I was running around doing reset procedures on every single wire and cable in this house to make sure that it didn't drop off. And I've had to rethink about the comments around, obviously it blew up, Willie Hockey's comments about Dermot Desmond. I've had to rethink about that. So I'm going to throw something out at you. And also, and Jim would have been in the room, obviously, when Jerry from the Irish Association of Celtic Supporters Clubs, Jim, mentioned at the meeting that he and others had with Michael Nicholson. Now, Jerry, I thought, spoke really well, passionately, very early on in the meeting, because what had happened, and this is all about narrative, this is all about media narrative, if you like, it was kind of viewed as a wee cozy up. I think that's what annoyed Jerry a wee bit. It was like a meeting of the associations and the affiliation with Michael Nicholson, you know, who's bringing the biscuits kind of thing, right? And Jerry was like, no, it wasn't like that at all, actually. So he put us right. He put everybody straight on it. And it's interesting, Jim, you've got to set the narrative early, because straight off the bat after the Kilmarnock game, I'm reading in the press, the Herald it was, that it was something of a damp squib, like it wasn't effective. But going back to a point Jim made, Chris, these guys who have been through protests and actions and all this kind of stuff, they know that's coming. So they've got the image and they're counting every single head prior to the 12th minute in the stand, so they can go back and say, actually, 75% of the fan that Jim described earlier, 75% of the fan who doesn't want to miss a game of football involving Celtic, home, away, friendlies, Europe, 75% actually stood with the protest. Yeah. Because the newspaper, the mainstream media, they would have written the narrative completely differently, Chris. And the guys that are involved, the guys and girls that are involved in this steering group now, already knew that was coming and were already prepared. Very well organised, Chris. These people know what they're doing. They've been through, not this particular, for this particular reason, but they have been through this before.
Yeah, and you've got to draw on that experience. I mean, look, I think the point is key. What we've been crying out for at Celtic is making sure we've got people who are capable and experienced and have the knowledge to perform certain roles. That's what we're doing as part of this movement. You know, we're making sure that we've got all the requisite parts lined up. Jobs for people who are best equipped to perform them. Having a strategy, as Jim says, having a vision. It's not just a one-off protest. It has to be, okay, this is a first step in a series of steps. How do we maximise the impact? You talk about the 12-minute protest. I'm never going to be in favour of something that I think could potentially harm the team. But you break it down and you say, well, actually, there's the symbolism of the 12th minute, you know, the 12th man in the 12th minute. You think about the amount of media coverage prior to the protest, so it was very much lined up, and this is mainstream media as well as everything on fan media. You then talk about the exposure that it had on television. You talk about certain alumni who are, you know, discussing it across various channels. People like Chris Sutton, who you were on with, and you know the various media platforms, the Sky Sports, who were covering it and covering frustration. So it had that element of how do we maximise the impact of that. It's not just about people not going in just to stick it to the board. It's not about that. It's about how can we do something that resonates, but also has that level of exposure where people say, oh, did that happen? It did happen. Look at that. Look at the coverage. Look at the fans coming in. Look at the effect it had when they came in. And then you've got, because it's been so well structured, you can then demonstrate the effectiveness, not through the eye test, but by saying, well, actually, we've got the figures here. We know exactly the ratio of fans that went in. We know the ratio of fans who chose to go in right from the start. You maintain a very unified position. It's not, you know, we've always said it's down to the individual fan what they do, but it's still demonstrated that this was an impactful event. The challenge now is making sure that they've got a forward going strategy to maximise on that impact. And it can't just be a rinse and repeat, right? You know, we won't get that same level of impact necessarily if we go and do it at the weekend or we do it throughout the season. We have to now think about, that's one message delivered. What are the other messages we now need to try and deliver? How do we manoeuvre this movement into something that tangibly brings the benefits that we want in terms of fan engagement, in terms of transparency into some of the decision-making process, having that two-way communication, building up that two-way communication with the relevant officials at the club. So that's what we want, and that's what we're driving towards. And it's never, just saying it's sack the board doesn't work. There's no way that that's going to happen. But what we're looking for is, say, how do we get representation, engagement, communication, and transparency?
Yeah, the sack the board thing's a great slogan. I mean, I don't mind hearing it, but I think everybody realises, like back in Jim's day in the 90s, there was the end result of getting rid of the board. This is a long drawn out process, as Jim says. It's not just one protest, one action at Rugby Park. I got sent this a wee break from the conversation, ladies and gents. I got sent this picture this morning from a good friend of mine who actually, back in the old days, back in the 90s, we would see each other all the time, both at school and at the Celtic games. And I remember at Hampden, during that infamous Hampden season, at half time, he would come over to see me. He was further along. I was behind the goals in the Celtic end of Hampden for that season. And yeah, Wes Thompson, my mate for 30 odd years, sent me this picture, guys, right? So this is obviously a famous result. You'll remember the hat-trick by Faustino Asprilla against Barcelona. You remember this game, guys, aye? So Newcastle beat Barcelona 3-2. Right. What's significant about this particular still, this image? What do you think?
Right. I recognise the guy on the left. Yeah.
Okay, who is it?
That's Tam Burns.
Anybody else you recognise in there? So who's standing next to Tam Burns? Do you recognise the Newcastle player? Right,
Danish guy.
You might remember him. You might remember him. It's John Dal Thomason. Remember he made the comment that became a viral meme.
And they need the money. Do you think so? That one, yeah.
He does need the money, right?
I think so.
He was brilliant. The look on his face. Who's hugging him? Who's hugging him? I'll throw this one to you, Double Denim. Who was the manager of Newcastle that's hugging him right there? Kenny Dalglish.
Yes, Kenny
Dalglish. And who's the other Newcastle player in the picture?
That's Barnes, John Barnes.
Johnny Barnes, 3 Celtic managers, and John Dal Thomason. I thought that was a tremendous picture. Wow. And I don't think there's an image of it. That's obviously a still from the game. But there you go. There's certainly a few Celtic legends in there, plus John Barnes. I thought you were going to say that.
I thought you were going to say I think it's the old guy in the back with Dermot Desmond's dad or something like that.
It might have been. The last time Dermot Desmond gave us any money. Right, here we go. We've got Dipper 5K, and Dermot's sin is dereliction of duty and sleeping at the wheel again. Right, I'm going to try and be as balanced as possible on this, right? So I've made my feelings known in relation to the running of this football club. I'll come back to Jerry speaking at the fan meeting, because there was a point that I want to make around that. Dermot Desmond, right, because he has this massive share, a dominant share, as David Lowe describes it, right, in Celtic. Not a majority share. He's not the owner. We all know this. But he is very dominant, which means that what he says goes. Are we all agreeing with that? That's the kind of impression I get. If he says it happens, right? Or not, as the case may be. If he's in this position, what he needs is somebody at the football club to run it day to day, right? Now, Jim will say this from the meeting as well. I think everybody realises you don't remove Dermot Desmond. The Dermot Desmond situation is that he's a immovable object. There needs to be either somebody swooping in to buy the club, which might not be a great thing either, or the shareholders club together. And obviously there's a lot of work being done on that, both with David Lowe, with his new group, and with the Celtic Trust, who have obviously been working on that for some time. That's a long process, right? And they're not even looking to try and match what Dermot's got at Celtic. What they are trying to do, though, is have some influence at Celtic, because at the moment, the singular shareholders don't have any real influence at Celtic, right? So Dermot Desmond, for a moment, if you can say, he puts somebody at Celtic who runs the show. Like, he's the overseeing, he's the all-seeing eye. But he's got someone at the club, Chris, who runs the show. And for a long time, let's just be clear on this, regardless of whether he's a CEO or a chairman, for a long time, that man was Peter Lawwell, right? And I truly believe that man still is Peter Lawwell. Now, I'm going to come back to you in this one as well, Jim. Willie Hawkey was a man who, in the deepest, darkest 90s, was involved with Jerry Weisfeld's consortium. You'll remember. I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but you had Jerry Weisfeld, who used to run Weisfeld's, which was what everyone wants, used to be what every woman wants.
That's right.
And yes, and I think Michael McDonald was his stepson. Am I right, Jim? And he ended up on the board at Celtic.
Yeah.
Willie Hockey ended up on the board at Celtic as well, but obviously Fergus's consortium, Fergus's group, they were the ones that ran the takeover. So when we go right back to that, so Willie's been involved in Celtic pre-takeover, post-takeover. He gave me an interview in the run-up to the St. Roch centenary game where he revealed, because I didn't know at this point, that it was actually Willie Hockey that introduced Dermot Desmond to Celtic. He brought Dermot to the table, right? And it came out the other day, and basically the one thing that really jumped out at me, and I've kind of used it in the tagline, Willie said, it looks like peace is breaking out. Now, I've not seen any peace breaking out in the public domain. Right, so I'm going to ask you first, Jim. Willie Hockey says peace is breaking out. I've not seen it. I don't think the fans have seen it. And the peace that we're talking about here is internally with Celtic or between Celtic and the fans, whatever, regardless. No peace is broken out in the public domain. So what I'm going to say here is if Willie knows that peace is breaking out, what does that look like? I'm going to go back to Jim's press conference. For me, what it looks like is that Brendan gets what he wants. So there's obviously a link between Willie and Brendan. They're very, very tight. Brendan gets what he wants. What is it that Brendan wants? Brendan obviously wants the unnamed character, the coward, to leave the football club, right? So if peace is breaking out, and we don't know about it on the outside of the bubble, and we don't, but if peace is breaking out, has Brendan Rodgers been given assurances? I am speculating, but it's based on information that's out there. Has Brendan Rodgers been given assurances, do you think, Jim, that you will get what you want? We're not going to give the credit to the fan movement because I don't think the club would do that. I don't think the club are going to bow down. But what they might do is they might focus on Brendan's complaint, which he made public at that press conference. So what I'm going to say here, I'm going to just put it out there. This is my view on it. The financials will be released. The chairman's statement will be in there from Peter Lawwell, and he won't step down until after that. And the chances are he'll step down at the AGM, but the decision's already been made and it's been communicated amongst the people that need to know within Celtic. Jim, do you think that's a realistic view? And I'm basing it on what I thought was quite an unusual in terms of the timing interview with Willie Hockey.
In fact, you said it was my press conference. That was quite good. Jim's press conference.
Your one, yes. It will always be known as your press conference.
The last point you made, I think, was the most valid point. I thought it was really random. Willie Hockey just to pop up and give an interview. I like Willie Hockey. Willie Hockey's done a phenomenal amount for Celtic Football Club over the years, both for the club and for individual players. Like Jinky's the obvious one, but he's one of these kind of like guys in the background who doesn't kind of publicise things. So I'd love to see Willie Hockey involved in the Celtic in some capacity. I think there's a bit of a fallout with Fergus back in the day, which is maybe why he ended up not being on the board. But I'd love Willie to be involved with Celtic. Who knows what's going to happen next? And that was one of the points, without saying anything about the meeting on Monday night, is it's one of these things that the point I made at the actual meeting was that when your objective is, sorry, find it and I've found it there. So, would you endorse the removal of Michael Nicholson? And the point I made at the meeting was, if Michael Nicholson left tomorrow, is that it done then? Is that achieved? No, there's more to be done than that. So some of these objectives in themselves are not the end game with this stuff. And it's also the fact, given, and I think it was mentioned at the meeting or maybe mentioned in a podcast or something, but the quote from Dermot when he said a number of years ago that if 1 million people wanted one thing, I'd be the 1,001st person that said, no, I'll do something different.
Yeah.
So he's not, he doesn't get to where he is by, being a kind of soft touch. So if this campaign starts and one of the objectives is we want this to happen and suddenly it happens, if I'm Dermot Desmond, I might look quite weak here. These bunch of fans have get this and I've bowed to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I'm Dermot Desmond, I'm not going to bow to any of this kind of stuff at all. And this is a very good reason to do that. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just found it, like you, I found it a bit random as to why Willie Hockey, why now. Something has to be done. Again, it's difficult to enter the mind of Dermot Desmond and how he thinks. He can't be happy getting knocked out the Champions League qualifiers. He can't be happy with the way that transfer window worked out. Mm-hmm. How much involvement he had, we're just speculating. with that. You know, I know we'll talk about the football at some point. The Tanecki, I can't pronounce it properly. If we had him for the qualifiers, so if I'm Dermot Desmond, I'm angry how this worked out. I'm angry at all the flack I'm getting. What I do next, who knows? But yeah, it's a kind of random interview with Willie the other day.
I share your admiration, I think it would be, for Willie Hockey, and I also share your view on the fact that I would like to see him at some point within the club, because I think he's a powerhouse. I don't think he's one of these guys that's on a board or is the chairman of a board who goes with the flow. I think, and by the way, maybe that's the way Dermot Desmond likes it, where everybody just goes with the flow. He's got his guy in there at the helm doing the day-to-day stuff, and everybody just does what they're told. But I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think it's healthy. I think you need to be challenged constantly at a club like Celtic, because going into that Kairat game, Chris, that's already been qualified with Jim, we should win that with what we've got. But let's not go in with just what we've got. Let's go in and make sure that we win it, right? Because I'm thinking of Tuneski particularly. Listen, we've only seen him playing in one game. We're so starved for creativity, and then he put in a performance like that, and you think, wow, we've been crying out for this, right? By the way, I'm going to be very cautious with that, because I thought Lewis Palmer started really well as a Celtic winger, and Nicholas Kuhn didn't. So I'm going to be very, very cautious about writing off Balikwisha. I am. But I'm thinking about that wing play, that jinky wing play down the left against Rangers, up against James Tavernier. Come on, he tore him to pieces. And then Kairat, all he had to do was create one chance. So all he had to do was create one chance. So, yeah, absolute frustration. And it really boils my emotion when I look at that and think, there's a guy we already knew about. He was already on the radar. He was already on the list. In relation to my point, and it is basically taking all the evidence that's out there and coming up with my own conclusion. And that's fine as well. I think that quote there, it looks like peace is breaking out. Well, it doesn't look like that to me or to any of the fans that were at the meeting that Jim was at the other night. It doesn't look like that at all. So where's that coming from? And obviously he is on the inside looking out. We're on the outside looking in. Is there peace? And is that peace tied into Jim's press conference on Friday? Is that peace that the fact that the unnamed person is going to leave the football club, but they won't bow down to the fans in doing so?
Well, it's one school of thought, rather. And as you say, it's based on speculation, because as we've often spoken about, these decisions are very insular, or these movements are very insular. Now, I don't think there's certainly not peace between the fans, the supporters, and the club at this point. But you're right; it could point to something that's happening internal. And if it's of the nature that you've described, where it might be the removal of an individual due to the actions that Brendan's referenced, then that for me would constitute trying to right the wrongs at that hierarchical level, right? But there's another point I want to go back to, something you mentioned there, and you talk about Dermot Desmond, for example, this figurehead that he is. And listen, I don't know Dermot personally. He's obviously extremely talented to get where he's at, and build up the empire that he does. And it's easy to place and vent all your frustrations at a figurehead and say he's the one that's making the decisions, and that might very well be true, right? The fact is, that's what it appears like, and we've had information to that effect. But we should also look at who's managing Dermot's expectations, right? Yeah, sometimes in organisations where you're part of a leadership team, or you're head of a function or an operation as part of a wider organisation, part of your job is to manage upwards, right? It's to manage upwards. It's to go to your boss and say, look, boss, we've got a high risk game coming up here. We should absolutely have enough to get through it, but you know what? We don't feel it's worth the risk to not get these guys in earlier. So actually, can we get the go-ahead to go and sign these guys? You have to make the strongest possible case. And part of me wonders, do we not have the personnel there that feel empowered enough, or have that confidence, or are able to put their hand up and challenge somebody like Dermot Desmond to say, look, Dermot, I know you don't think this guy's worth this money, but actually we've taken into consideration all these factors, and look, we need to make the strongest possible case to get this player in, because and someone who actually has got the foresight to say, if we don't get through here, boss, the fans are going to be at the end of their tether, and we could get some really bad PR, and it's could impact the financials. Talk in impactful terms, make the man understand, right? And if he still doesn't, well, then that's fine. You can label the failure of Dermot Desmond, but I think there is a collective failure, and it goes deeper than what Jim said, where you've got 50% on the board and 25% of players and the manager.
Yeah,
I think that 50% within, and it's too simple to call it the board. You look at the various different operations, and in particular recruitment, and you just think something's broken down there. Why is it breaking down? And peace for me would constitute taking a look at what the reasons were for that failure and rectifying them. And if that means that, look, let's no longer lowball offers for players, let's recognise the market that we're in, let's support the manager to the extent that we need to. That would constitute peace, and then that reflects onto the product on the park. You've got a happy manager who commits his time to the club. You bring in players are playing in a unified fashion, and that's how you start to get the fans back on board.
See that example? See that example when you said boss? Was that like the chief executive talking to the dominant shareholder in that example?
We don't. It could be. We don't know what the
we do know. We do know. Though.
We have a high degree of confidence in what.
That is what happens, mate. We all know that's what happens.
But the point I would make
that is not speculation.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
That's not speculation. Dermot Desmond calls the shots. 100%. Anybody you speak to at the football club, any information that's available out in the open source, Dermot Desmond calls the shots. Come on.
Fine, right. So we take that as gospel, right? But what is the criteria for him calling the shots? What's he calling the shots based on, right? And that's
OG's buzzing in. OG's buzzing in.
I'm buzzing. What we should do should be a new setup. We want buzzers in this new setup, bad, right?
So what's your sound? What sound is your buzzer though?
Just like University Challenge, McElwain, double denim. I'd like to say this.
All right.
The point is that I would have thought, right, in most organisations, your chief executive is the guy that the board, are totally confident to make the right decisions. And in most cases, he or she is the smartest person in the room to be the chief executive. Mm-hmm. So they make the decision. You put all your faith in him or her to make decisions. And if they make a mess of it, they're out. So that's clearly not happening. The scenario that you just said there that says, I'm the chief executive, I'm all-knowing, but I need to go and run to someone else. That's just a recipe for disaster.
OG, don't know what my buzzer sound is, right? Something like that. I remember when Peter Law came back as a chairman, and we had a conversation on here, Chris, and it was around the defined role of a chairman. And I said, tear that up. That's not what Peter Law was coming back to do. And if anybody thinks that we do stick to these roles, right, just have a look at the governance, right? Look at the governance and what we are breaching right now as we sit here in terms of the longevity of some of the people that are involved at Celtic, and also the fact that the CEO came back as a chairman. So we're breaching governance. We're doing what we want. We're doing what we want, right? As
under normal circumstances, if we were any kind of typical private sector organisation, you'd be under massive scrutiny.
And that's the point I made at the meeting. In that, if you've got objectives set, and that's why I said maybe these are not the right objectives, and that's not to say anything against it, because it's what do we do, guys? Because basically, if you can point to a couple of directors, non-executive directors, and you say, in actual fact, that's bad corporate governance. It's not an opinion. It's not me saying, I don't think the chief executive is doing a good job, or the finance or the chairman. It's not an opinion. It's a fact to say that maybe that should be the objective that says, we've got a couple of non-exec directors, nothing personal, but corporate governance says that shouldn't happen. Now, maybe that might be something that Dermot Desmond thinks, you know what, guys, you're right. Maybe you're right. So let's just get them away and get somebody else. And then as a kind of campaign, you would say, that's our first result. Maybe when, and I talk, again, I bore the hell off everyone, talk these smart objectives again. Get rid of Michael Nicholson. Is that a smart objective? I think it is, it's quite specific. It's quite measurable. He's in or out. Is it achievable? Possibly realistic? Time barred. So we want to rid of him in the next 2 months. Is it smart? Yes, it is. But is it the right objective? Is it a better objective to go somewhere else? And that's not a criticism of what's actually happening, because, as I said, that meeting the other night, loads of brilliant ideas, lots of discussion, lots of, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Great stuff. But in terms of trying to achieve something relatively quickly, I think if you point at something that's more objective than subjective, it's not an opinion. And we've been talking to death about this whole not very good corporate governance. Because what David Lowe said, and this is Acsom last Friday night, was back in the day, the non-executive directors were huge big hitters. Guy for the Bank of England, they were just massive big hitting guys who were going to, one I imagine, is going to say their piece. The point I made earlier, you're going to go to a meeting, then you may have to make an effective contribution to the meeting. These guys would. We don't know what these current non-executive, for all we know, they're doing a fantastic job, but we don't know. Again, that's maybe a lack of transparency, a lack of communication. If somebody came out and said, see that non-executive director, in the last 5 years, he's done A, B, C, D, and E, well, that's good. But we don't know. And that's the other thing. A lot of the stuff we're in the dark. And in fact, most of the things were in the dark. Whether it's football or non-football, we're just expressing opinions. That's all we're doing. Shooting the breeze.
But you can express an opinion based on the information available to you and then strengthen your argument with that information. And with regards to the way Celtic is operating as we sit here just now, we know who the main players are. And the main players are obviously Dermot Desmond. He's got to sell in that dominant position. It's Peter Lawwell, who has a title of chairman, but his influence at the football club is renowned. And then you've got Michael Nicholson, who is the CEO. And obviously Chris Mackay's been pulled into this as well as the CFO. But in terms of decision-making, I mean, he is advising in relation to finances when we're doing deals, etc. But I think you're talking about lowballing. We've lowballed so many teams that there's agencies that won't actually even return their calls. And they won't even return their calls now.
Public exposure as well. We're getting, your reputational damage, and I think
so that needs to be repaired, Chris.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing. It's about, if you base it purely on your output, right? So if we don't know what the inner workings are, as Jim said. We've got certain insight into how it's been, as you said as well. But you look at the output. We're out of Europe again. What was that? 7 out of 9 attempts, right? Are out of Europeans' top competition, I should say. We are, we continually get players in as late as possible in the transfer window. Now, from a football standpoint, that can't be the most effective or efficient way to do it. It just can't. The manager's got less time to work with these guys before we're into the meat and bones of the season. So that's poor. Other clubs, as we've said, are taking pot shots at us publicly. Directors of other clubs taking pot shots. Now, some of that you might expect because it might be a strategy in other clubs, but it's happening too often and too consistently. So you say, well, actually, our reputation is going, is going down the toilet because of the way we are engaging and working with different clubs, and that's damaging again for the football operation. And then, we can't tie down what is one of our most successful managers, even though he has expressly indicated a willingness and a desire to stay. So if you take those very simple factors in terms of the output of this so-called club hierarchy or leadership team or operational team, however you want to term them, they're not delivering. So, surely the opposite of the output would have been the objectives. Strengthen the football operation, make sure we get through in Europe, generate as much revenue, and build the positive exposure and brand of the football club. So none of those things have been done. So to go back to Jim's point, who's taking accountability for that? And for me, even if Dermot Desmond is making decisions based on what he's been told by Peter Lawwell or Michael Nicholson or whoever it is, surely he can see what's going on and say, well, guys, why didn't this go well? Why is this not going the way we expect? Why are the fans all up in arms? What do we need to change here?
I'm going to go back to your point, no, Chris. You're talking about managing up the way. That's a huge issue at Celtic because the people that are at the football club are part of the problem, right? So
don't think it happens.
The issue right now is Michael Nicholson and Peter Lawwell. They're never managing up the way. We've got a situation where Brendan Rodgers sometimes, in fact, on a regular basis, and he said it on Friday, is speaking to Dermot Desmond. Why should the manager of the football club be speaking to the guy that's got more shares than anybody else? That's dysfunctional. That should not be the case, right? Yes. But he does that, and he does it regularly. So if your chairman, right, is singing for the same hymn sheet, right, and he's the guy on a day-to-day basis, and he becomes a block, then you're fighting a losing battle if you're Brendan Rodgers. And all I'm saying here is all the objectives that are being set out by fans, there's no way the club are going to say, no problem, and we'll get a tick on every single one of them. There's going to be some kind of middle ground, right?
Yeah.
And if the middle ground in the next couple of months, because the AGM, I believe, is set for November, is that somebody steps down somebody who has already been identified steps down, and they don't make a big song and dance about it, and they certainly don't say it's because of the fan action, because I don't think they would concede that. But it keeps Brendan Rodgers happy, and the whole operation starts to work better. They'll see that as a win as a football club. Whether or not the fans are happy with that, I'm not so sure. I think there needs to be some long-term objectives, even if one of the guys that's been mentioned of the three, because Peter Lawwell, Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay have been mentioned by the steering group, the fan supporter group. Even if we get one of them to step down, what then happens? It all depends on who becomes a chairman. It all depends on how does that affect January's transfer window. What's the mood? What's the mood of the fan base after that happens, Chris?
And I think you're right. The fan base have to be very clear on what they would expect good to look like in terms of change, right? Because if we suddenly have a good January transfer window, the noise can't just end there. If you've really got a clear objective in mind. And look, as I say, I don't think I've never viewed the fan movement that we have at the moment as, we want all these guys out and lynched in the street and all that sort of thing. No, of course not. It's not about that. But what we're looking for is change, positive change, whether it be in communication, engagement, representation, all these things we've spoken about. And I think, the fan movement has to have a clear set of objectives, right? And to say, if all these things or, 80% of these things are met, for example, then we say, actually, that's objective achieved. That's I think that has to be the case. And you're right. The board will probably not look at the fan movement and say, well, whether they view it as a catalyst or not, they'll never let that be known. No. It'll be an idea conjured up from within. Oh yeah, great. Yeah, no, guys, this was all part of the plan. This is part of the strategy. This is our response to what we viewed. And you know what? Actually, see, even if they take that approach, I don't care, because ultimately what I care about is the health and quality and continued success of the football team. So if that's what they want to do for their own egos, then fine. My feeling is, though, that there needs to be some sort of open or public gesture, and if that's someone like, say, a figurehead like Peter Lawwell maybe stepping down, or Michael Nicholson moving on, or someone else coming into the club maybe even to take on certain roles, that I think the fans, certainly supporters, need that at this point.
They can't shuffle the
chairs. You
mentioned
dysfunctional.
They can't just shuffle the chairs and put somebody else who's already part of the clique in a different position, because the culture and all the mistakes that have been happening, resulting in the frustrations, will continue. Yeah. Sorry, Jim, I thought you were giving me a word. You gave me a buzz.
Just before you jump in, Jim, I was going to say,
wasn't it working?
Even if we get, I say, a better window, or into next summer, whatever, and it looks as though changes happened, the anxiety will remain. The anxiety,
and a new contract for Brendan. I think that's important, Chris. A transfer window in January that meets your expectations, but also a contract for Brendan Rodgers. And I think you need that. They go hand in hand, because to sign players in January, you need to give the players some kind of assurance that the manager who's actually selling the vision to you is going to be your gaffer long term, not just for 6 months.
You mentioned dysfunctional, and that's the word, because basically how it should work in a normal organisation. The chief executive is kind of all powerful, and if things go pear-shaped, he or she is the one that gets it in the neck, and that's it. And they should be the smartest person to be the chief executive. You shouldn't have other people who are smarter than them not being that. So he or she is the head kiddie. It goes pear-shaped, it's their fault. Bit confused why the finance director's in there, says me defending fellow accountants. So it's a bit like when it gets down to the three in the boardroom and the apprentice, and somebody says, I don't know what I'm doing here. I kind of feel that for the finance guy, because the finance guy sets budgets and says, that's your budget. On you go, chief executive, you make decisions. I've told you the numbers. So the finance director for me is not making decisions, it's the chief executive. So I'm not sure why he's in the room. He can be moved out of the room. And the chairman is more of a kind of a showy job, a kind of cosmetic-y, talks to the city, talks to the annual report, we're all pals together, goes to events, glad hands. There's very little involvement at all. That's a kind of normal company. But we don't have a normal company. We have this dysfunctional company where the finance guy is getting roped in because he's not really making decisions. The chief executive, not being the chief executive, he's talking to the dominant shareholder, and the dominant shareholder's doing this. In actual fact, when you go into specifics and you think, well, how does this work? How does this work? Where a club says we want 5 million for him and he wants 25 grand a week. What happens next in that scenario? Who talks to who and who does what?
Yeah.
Because the finance guys said, they said, you've got the budget for that, guys.
Yeah.
That's his involvement, her
I
involvement.
think you're right.
That's them away. And therefore, it's to the chief executive to say yes or no to that. Not for he or she to go away and talk to somebody else. So how does that work then? So they want 5 million, he wants 25 grand a week. Finance guy says to the chief executive, that's in the budget, you can afford that. He takes that and then goes to somebody else and says, what do you think? And we think that's the dominant shareholders who says, no, offer them 3 and give them 20 grand a week. And he goes back and he says, give you 3, 20. No. Is that how it works?
Well, Jim, I can only base this on the Luke McKeown information that I got last week in terms of something that happened fairly recently involving negotiations with our CEO. Now, that didn't even come to £2 or £3 million of a difference in terms of the argument. That came down to £200,000 of a difference. Small change in the world of Celtic. Small change for a club who, if rumours are to be believed, will have £100 million sitting in the bank by the time the financials come out. And we're arguing the toss over a 200 grand difference between what the club wanted and what Celtic were willing to pay. What frustrates me a hell of a lot is to hear that the CEO can't make that decision to push it up by 200 grand. And he needs to go away and get advice elsewhere. That, for a CEO at Celtic Football Club, give me a break. 200 grand for a player that the gaffer wants, Chris.
Final decision maker. Come on. Should not
That's
be
embarrassing, mate. That's
embarrassing. 100% agree.
We need powerful people in these positions. We don't need people who have been over-promoted and are overwhelmed by the job.
Exactly. And you need, I think the key thing is you need to make sure that people are empowered enough to perform their roles to the full extent, right? You need a governance process that functions. You need, if you're talking about an approval hierarchy, that's fine. Map it out and that's your approval hierarchy. But, your CEO, as Jim said, it should be the ceiling for that type of operation, right? He has oversight of all the different footballing departments. They'll have heads of their department and they'll, come to him with the various factors and say, right, Mr. Nicholson, would you sign this? We sign this on. He's like, yep, okay, that checks out, right? Yep, absolutely. Oh, they want another 500 grand. Well, within budget, absolutely. There you go and get it done. And those functional heads will be justifying their position and saying, yep, the reason we want this is this, and he's.
Oh, Chris, sorry to jump in, mate. What happens when the CEO goes rogue and signs Juranovic and Giakoumakis without checking with the other heads? What happens then is they get
there shouldn't be another head. There should not be.
They get binned if they make the decisions at Celtic without doing all the checks that we know are happening. Sorry, Jim is choking to jump in here, right? They get binned after 70 odd days. That's what happens.
Well, but that's a fundamental problem, right? Is you have to empower people to be able to do their jobs.
Of course.
Look, there's always going to be scrutiny, but base the scrutiny on the results, right? Don't base the scrutiny on, I didn't sign off on that, so I'm not. You've got to trust your people to do the jobs that they're brought in to do, right? Now, a CEO won't make every single decision, right? A CEO will have oversight, but he'll be expecting certain things from his departmental heads or leads or personnel. And if they're meeting that criteria, they're meeting the performance metrics that he or she set out, then that's how that should operate. And it should all be documented and it should all be part of a clear, defined process. And, if you need to make an exception in that process, you make it, you go through the appropriate channels. There just seems to be a lack of governance, a lack of accountability, and a lack of overall clearly defined leadership in relation to a well-functioning organisation. And I think that goes to Jim's point about dysfunction.
Jim,
and that's why chief executives are paid the big bucks. Paid a lot of money because their head's on the line.
Yeah.
So if we're paying £800,000 a year for chief executive who can't make decisions, I don't understand.
It's incredible, isn't it? I'm going to bring in some of these comments before we wrap up. By the way, there is a game at the weekend that we will talk about in the pre-match. We kind of got waylaid there. Jim has come up with a novel idea of buzzers. Should we just have words? And if so, what should Chris's, Jim's and my words be? Jay Conley, Jay Larkin says, be interesting to see if any of the mainstream media hacks follow up in the Spears article. Don't know if you read the Spears article, gents?
I've not read it yet.
Go and read it, because basically he kind of pours scorn on the fact that the rat even exists. It's a very interesting take, although I don't agree with it. I absolutely disagree with it. And he is basically painting, if I read it right, he's painting Brendan Rodgers as the architect of this situation. I just don't think anybody can manipulate something to that degree, and for him to pull it off to get the result he's hoping to get. AGSC Tech, Acsom is the Celtic World Service. Thanks for all the content. Thank you all for tuning in and for supporting us the way you just did as well. And we'll keep the content coming in. This type of debate, when we're all choking to say something, will work better when we're all sitting in the same room, which is going to be happening very, very soon. This is the type of debate that I live for, Chris, where not everybody's agreeing, but it's so much easier when you're in the same room, not waiting for somebody to stop talking. You might even think that's a rabble, but it's good fun. If Law had anything to do with that Pusey signing, Rodgers won't play him. I've said in the past, JL, that unfortunately he feels no obligation to play players that he did not himself buy. Inamura and Yamada have already felt the force of that. James Kerwin, how can any business let 40 million slip through their hands and no one is held to account when it was as plain as day what had to be done to achieve securing this income and progress in Champions League football? Chris, do you need to jump off or anything else, mate?
I will need to jump off shortly.
You had ants in your pants there. I'm going to let you go then, because there's a few more of these comments I want to get through.
I've got to go and manage upwards and tell my boss what he should do. That's what I'm going to go and do. So.
I thought you were going to say, I'm going to have to tell my boss, i.e. your wife, something. Right. I'll let you go. You have a great weekend, young man.
Thanks,
always
everybody.
A pleasure. Fantastic.
Just
I just don't want to chop anybody or cut anybody off when we've got some great points coming through, as we are. So there we go. Alan Robertson, always a pleasure to see you, Alan, and I hope you're well. With a view to next week in the Europa League, how many changes does Brendan make on Sunday? I think, just again, taking information that we have seen before, Alan, I don't think he'll make as many changes as maybe some of us would like. He tends to play strongest team, something that Jim Orr is very much behind. We've also got another one in from Jay Conley, Jay Larkin. Spears' article clearly done at the behest of Lowell, dragging stuff up from 8 years ago and likening Brendan to Murray of the Succulent Lamb years. Go and have a read of it, just to highlight that Brendan is selfish. The timing of it, unusual, absolutely. Graham Spears, I think, for many a year, has been one of Scottish football's best pundits. I don't know if you agree with that, Jim. I know he's a Rangers fan and all that, but I used to enjoy him on the TV as well. I used to really enjoy how he was able to put his point across. Very balanced, I felt. He would criticise the team that he supported as well. Pinball, what made you think something was going to be communicated? I just think that at this point, there is an obligation for a football club to communicate with its fans. And if the fans are clearly unhappy, and when so many groups come together to show that unhappiness, then it's only natural. And by the way, it would have taken the sting out of it, I believe, if they had communicated effectively with the fans, which they've not done yet. Thomas Connolly, Jim Orr, there's a spot available tonight at the Stand Comedy Club if you want it. Jim, see if you were just to walk on and just be Jim, I think you would have a few laughs. In fact, I'd pay to watch that. Paul Rees, United we stand, divided we fail. What was it? Miners United will never be defeated. I remember that chant back in the old strike days. Tony Cunningham, was that the problem with Don Mackay? Jim is the OG. Tremendous banter. We know that Jim is the OG. And Stevie Boy, I'm in the minority. Even you must admit that. PJ, is it me or is there another PJ? I'm not sure what minority I'm in. Let me know and I'll answer that. The Slabbering Cabbage, Desmond should have absolutely nothing to do with recruitment or signings. He should have a world-class recruitment and scouting that is trusted to do it. We should. Yeah. We don't. Yeah. I'm going to throw one last thing out, Jim. You were in the room. I was going on this point, but we were waylaid. You were in the room when Jerry made that fantastic point, Jerry from the Irish Association of Celtic Supporters Clubs, And the point that he made was, and by the way, I think we were all waiting for the punchline, but he basically just made a point that was 100% true, was that Michael Nicholson had that vision pinned up on his whiteboard, the vision that's never ever been shared with the fans. So we don't know what the club wants to do in Europe, Jim, in 3 or 5 years, because they've never actually shared that with us. But the laughable bit that I remember is that he had something highlighted underneath, or it was maybe a post-it underneath the vision, to remind himself every day when he walked into his office, must communicate to fans, meaning that he must communicate this vision to the fan base, and it's never ever been happened. What was your reaction to that, Jim? Because that was quite early in the meeting, and it was a bit of a shocker from Jerry, wasn't it?
I thought that Michael Nicholson made that up as a kind of throwaway remark, because if it was true, you were thinking, why would you admit to that? Why would you admit to something so daft?
Knowing it's going to go out to other supporters.
I've got a post-it pad saying I must do something, I must do better. And this goes back to the point about whatever position you're appointing someone to, you want the very best person to be appointed to that job. And it's no slight on the person in the job. This is more of a slight on who's appointed the person. Mm-hmm. And they talk about, and it's not me again, and I think it's always good to play words back to people. And the words world class was mentioned a few years ago by, I think, the current chairman and even maybe the current chief executive. We aim to be world class in everything we do. Are they? Are they really? Because if you don't do that and you have something that's less than world class, quite significantly less than world class, it becomes dysfunctional. And that's the point you made. So we've got this dysfunction. And as I said at the start of the show, I think the level of anger has started to go down. And I think we have to maintain that level of anger to remember what it's like not to qualify for the Champions League. Because the only reason that we're fairly upbeat is because what's happening across the city. It's because they've imploded. And we're 9 points clear, so we should win the league now. But if it was neck and neck, we wouldn't be as kind of like less angry as we are just now, I think. And I just talk about football for 1 second. I think both squads are pretty similar. And I think Martin will be away, and whoever they get, we'll get a tune out of that team. Because we're not doing particularly. I think the biggest difference between the teams is we are actually minded to scrape results, and they're not. So good to have the 9 point lead, but once they get a decent manager in there, I think they've brought quite a good number of players in there. So we have to get our act together. We can't be complacent. And I think we are getting a wee bit complacent now. Our 9 points clear, and who cares what's over there?
That happened
and we've kind of forgotten. Yeah. And we've kind of forgotten that we've been knocked out of the Champions League. And Kairat played the other night. We didn't. So I think you have to hang on to that anger. And that's the big thing, that if we go 12 points clear and then we sign some more players in January and we maybe win the Glasgow Derby significantly and we're going to be running this Europa League, well, what are you moaning about? Because you know it's going to happen next year unless something happens. And I was encouraged, again, if this is the last thing we do today, really encouraged sitting in for you the other night in that meeting at the quality of people that are on that committee. Intelligent, articulate, passionate, enthusiastic. And also the thing I said again, I'm going to repeat myself, these are the guys that are going, all around the country, all around Europe, following Celtic. And the passion is incredible. And you said it earlier, you felt it that night in that room. Mm-hmm. Dead easy, old bloke, rabbiting on, do this. But different thing altogether in that room. And a real determination to do something. So no doubt there'll be something coming out today about what the next steps in the campaign is. So, and more power to their elbow, as the phrase goes. Again, I'm going to end with this board: never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think it's a brilliant phrase.
It is a very good phrase, yeah. And there's loads to talk about in relation to everything that we've covered. We've not even dug in as deep as I'd like to on many of the points, which is why maybe at some point in the future, in the near future, Acsom is going to be even longer than 1 hour, because sometimes I just feel we've not covered everything in as much depth as we might. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. We have, for the first time ever, we finally tracked him down. Fellow Fifer, Bruni, there you go. I had one condition on this poster. It's got to be I'm doing the Bruni. There he is, 3rd of December 2025 at Balazar Design. He's going to meet me on stage and tell me what it takes to become an absolute icon at Celtic Park, which he was and still is in many ways. Yes, come along and see us. Tickets, not very many left. We're down to double figures, but the link is underneath this video. Got to say thank you, everybody, for your support. It's been remarkable. Always is. Let's get in amongst the chat. Let's disagree. Let's agree. That's what it's all about. But whatever you do, join us again 30 minutes before the Thistle game for a Celtic State of Mind.